Hello and welcome back to the Marsii show. Today I want to mention someone that I've never dedicated a video to. I don't think I've actually ever spoken about them on YouTube. And that is the Rewired Soul. And I want to talk about him and his new book. Now, part of this came from Primink's latest video, which will be linked in the description because it's an interesting video. But what is mentioned there is another YouTuber that I have made many a video about called Repzilla. Now, I have said recently that I wasn't going to make any more videos on Repzilla, but I feel like this is an exception because the Rewired Soul wrote a book called Cancelled Inside YouTube Cancel Culture. And Repzilla is mentioned, and the insight that the Rewired Soul gives into his friendship with Repzilla is interesting to say the least. Rep is mentioned in regards to the chapter, or at least section, regarding Primink, which Primink based his entire video on. But there are some things that are kind of interesting. And I don't feel like either of them would make a video specifically about it or addressing it or even mentioning it. I got my hands on a free copy, a PDF. I feel like Repzilla wouldn't want to talk about it because of the negative press that it had on him previously, and he wouldn't want to bring that back up. But yeah, let's just jump right in. Around 80 pages into the over 200 page book, or that's at least how long the PDF is, Repzilla gets his first real mention and his only real mention apart from the Primink section. And the context to what I'm about to read is that what was said before this, and I suppose where the majority of this section and this part of what I'm going to read you actually comes into it, is based off a different situation that all three were involved in, and Primink ended up being involved in, and some other people around that time were also involved in, but I haven't made a video about the person. And you may actually be thinking, well, who are they? I am not going to mention them. And Chris doesn't mention them in this book, and good on him, because who knows what could happen. It says, soon after this blew up, a commentary channel by the name of Repzilla, who I mentioned in the Primink chapter. Also, as I said, Primink goes into detail about his chapter in his own video, which, as I said, will be linked in the description. Wanted to get the story straight. This was around the time when the drama channels ended up attacking me too, and Repzilla was asked by his audience to cover the story. He reached out to me as well as her. I was happy he was doing this because he's one of the most honest creators out there, and I knew he'd be fair with his coverage. He's never had a problem calling me out when he disagrees with me, but he's also logical. Part of me wants to just read this to you and just read it because that's what this video is about, but I just can't help but kind of laugh at I knew he'd be fair with his coverage, and he's one of the most honest creators out there. I mean, if you know my experiences with Repzilla, then you know that is not true. Damn, maybe I should have stirred up some stuff with the Rewired Soul. Maybe I will go and mention, got some publicity, you know? Good old publicity. That's a joke, by the way. Chris goes on to say that in the process of Repzilla trying to make sure he was understanding her correctly, she freaked out on him, much like she did with me on Twitter. She started accusing him of trying to twist her words. He later released their DMs to defend himself, but just like me, he was trampled by the hate mob for it. Now, this is a autobiography, and it's also stated in multiple parts, I believe, that like cancel culture doesn't care about the facts or something like that. that in itself is, I won't exactly say wrong, it's more misinformed. Because Repzilla was trampled by the hate mob for releasing off the record messages. And also, the way he conducted his interview, despite Chris saying that he was trying to make sure that he was understanding, he being Repzilla. If you actually read the interview, it seems very pushy and second guessing and kind of pressuring to some regard as well. Chris goes on to say that Repzilla ended up taking the video down that he made about our situation. Something you learn about the hate mob during a cancel culture scenario is that if you don't agree that the person being cancelled should be burnt at the stake, the mob will come after you. Since Repzilla tried to cover the story with logic and honesty, the mob came after him with a vengeance. He ended up buckling, taking down the video as well as other videos about me, and he made a video saying that I'm not a good person. This is an interesting observation, and it is down to personal opinion, but I don't personally think that the reason why there was backlash for Repzilla's videos about Chris, I don't think it was because he wasn't like agreeing or whatever with the hate mob, as Chris calls it. From my understanding, it was because he was overly biased. And yes, I mean, sure, Chris says there's honesty. I mean, there's honesty and there's bias. If you're honest about one side, then you're biased because you're not trying to present the full picture. You're trying to make someone else look like the good guy without presenting all the facts. And no video trying to be honest about someone should make you come out of that experience not questioning anything. It should make you question whether they're as good as you thought they were, whether they're as bad as you thought they were. It's meant to be evenly weighted, or as evenly weighted as possible. That's if you're trying to present a fair piece, which a lot of people thought that Repzilla was not. That although Repzilla was trying to present it as such, that he actually, whether it was deliberate or not, was just trying to get people back on Chris's side. That was the general consensus, as far as I remember. I will be honest, I think I saw one or two of the videos. I've never actually watched a Rewired Soul video, which is probably why I never covered it in the first place, because I was just kind of like, I just don't get it, you know? Didn't really feel right at that point, just putting myself in a situation, you know? Chris goes on to say, I was going to write a whole chapter about Repzilla, but I'll leave it at this. Even though we weren't friends, but were more colleagues, I had a ton of respect for him. Now, before I go on, just quick, it's interesting because Rep also said that they weren't friends. Although Rep had worked on a thumbnail and there's kind of like evidence to suggest that they were friends and stuff, Chris also backs this up, so that's interesting. I'm not disputing and saying that they were actually friends. I think that colleagues is definitely a term that works, and it makes sense. They were like helping each other out, you know? The fact that he turned on me knowing that the mob scared him into doing so made me lose just about all respect for him. Later, he'd be attacked by both Primink and this woman. We could have been there to support one another, but we stopped talking. We've spoken briefly where I've shared how he hurt me, and he seems remorseful. I'm guessing the key word there is seems. The interesting part about that is that he says that the mob scared him into doing so, which is interesting. It's like Repzilla goes with the crowd or something. It's an interesting observation. I forgive him, but I now know he's someone who won't stand by his principles in an effort to appease the mob, and I cannot have people like that in my life anymore. I need people who stand by me, understand that I screw up sometimes, but that makes me human and not an evil person. This makes sense. This makes total sense. I don't know if it's 100% legit or not, as I have never spoken to Chris. I don't have communication. But the line that just about sums up Repzilla just as a whole is, I now know he's someone who won't stand by his principles in an effort to appease the mob. And it's true. It's sad, but it's true. And unfortunately, Chris had to learn the hard way. I feel like I'm making Chris sound like the victim. I haven't gone into detail with anything he's done. There's a whole bunch of videos by a whole bunch of people about what he did that got him to the stage of being cancelled. And from what I've seen, although I haven't watched his videos, from what I've seen with the evidence that has been put forth by Primink and others, I understand that aspect. And based on the evidence, whether or not it is biased, just purely based on that, I would agree with it. But as I said, I haven't seen his content, so I can't say that I have also come to the same conclusion, because all I've seen is evidence. I hope that makes sense. One of the last bits that mention Repzilla in the book is as follows, and it says, "Everyone is too afraid to try and absolve you of the accusations made against you in fear of what happened to Repzilla. But part of them knows everything was blown out of proportion, and you can tell by the way they follow up these stories. Unless you're James Charles with 15 million subscribers, there's a very slim chance anyone who cancelled you will ever apologize for playing a part in your demise." Now, this is also interesting to me. It may not be interesting to you, but I want to just quickly share some thoughts on this, because part of it's true, but part of it in a way doesn't make sense, because apologizing for someone's demise, if you feel like the video you're making or the evidence that you're presenting that leads to them being cancelled, if you feel like that is valid, then what are you apologizing for? You are simply pointing out their bad behavior, for example. Are you apologizing for letting it slide, or are you apologizing for calling them out for it and not letting them get away with it? Like, what exactly are you apologizing for? Because as it says, there's a very slim chance anyone who cancelled you will ever apologize for playing a part in your demise. I mean, unless it was completely unjust, then there's no reason to, is there? Maybe the person who was being cancelled, if it was valid, should be the one apologizing for their actions. Also, the part about everyone is too afraid to try and absolve you of the accusations made against you in fear of what happened to Repzilla, that is exactly true. Now, everyone is a very bold statement, and therefore it's highly unlikely, but the thing with Repzilla defending the Rewired Soul, that wasn't why he was then cancelled. He was cancelled for a whole bunch of stuff that was nothing to do with that. But it was found out purely because of his videos on the Rewired Soul. They drew a lot of negative attention, and so people looked for more negative things and then just accumulated it into a video. But as with Repzilla and potentially the Rewired Soul, I haven't looked at the comment section, so I don't know, but I'm just going to assume, make an ass out of you and me, but I'm going to assume that people were defending him as well, although it may not have been the overwhelming response, but I've definitely seen people defending Repzilla, and still to this day defending Repzilla, even though he got cancelled. And although there's a whole bunch of stuff that debunk all these claims that they say, it makes it a lot more difficult for people to defend someone or try and counter-argue things when there's evidence to suggest otherwise, because someone can be like, I think this person's a good person, but the video or videos that are going round or that have led to the cancellation of someone actually having evidence to back them up. You can't just say that you think someone's a good person without therefore backing up your claims as well. Otherwise, it's simply evidence against hearsay. And that is where I think a lot of the cancel culture simply comes from, I guess. And this also ties into James Charles, for example. The video by Tati that was made against him that led to his temporary cancellation, his response video also featured evidence. And it was well made and such. Repzilla's response, for example, terrible. Still unlisted to this day. It was up for a little while, maybe a week or two or something like that. But yeah, that's all I really have to say for this video. If you've read any of Chris's book, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'll see you soon for more content, and I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, leave a like and subscribe if you are new.